Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is really my great pleasure to stand up here in front of all of the very heavyweight legal professionals or experts. And of course, my topics is, the Hong Kong police force, how can it, contribute to the rule of law regime in Hong Kong. And to cut it short, perhaps my experience may be interesting to some of the audience today sitting here. Although I have 29 years of experience working in the police force, thereafter I retired, formally retired, officially retired, and then I take up 2 years teaching job in the universities, and thereafter I practice as a barrister. And then bearing one thing in mind, those are two heavyweight experts, Mr. Zheng and also Mr. Alvaro is actually my pupil master. For all those information or the PowerPoint notes I gave to you, I must declare that it comes from the public domain and just from the website, and there's no confidential information. I try to take out from my past experience in the force, and I look at the bundles placed on my table. And I do notice that there's a police order 2002, and I think it's issued by NRB. And if you want to get the similar police order, and then we have those official copies from the website, the Hong Kong Police Force website. Of course, it's not the full, orders, and it is those orders the police force thinking that it is, suitable to be understood by the general public, and then just upload it in the web. Some other confidential issues were deleted, but it's a good reference for you. So I didn't bring along any police orders, but you can get it or download it from the website. And today's presentation, I would try to focus on a few issues. Of course, I would try to make some sort of a comparison between the rule of law and rule by law. The rule by law to the police force is really very important. And then put it simple, is the strict enforcement of the law. And thereafter, I would try to illustrate to you what we call the vision, common purpose, values we have in the force, and that is really very important in our transformation from that what our chairperson here just saying that in 1974 the corruption is really very rampant, and then nowadays the police force to a certain extent is well received to be the Asia's finest, clean and efficient. And thereafter, I would try to focus or spend some time on the basic training in the police force. And following that, I would try to make some sort of comparison between two former commissioners of the police. One is Dick Lee. He is, I think, the most respectful commissioner in the force. And the police force has 160 years of history. And the other commissioners I will refer to is Andy Zheng, who recently retired a few months ago. And then he makes some sort of publication in the annual review. And then I try to compare those two speeches given by those two former commissioners. Then you can know the transmission or also the progress the force has made in relation to corruption and also some other operational matters. And thereafter, I would try to have some sort of discussions on the Occupy Central issue to see whether nowadays and then the police force, they really have a very key role to play in upholding the rule of law in Hong Kong. And perhaps, and we go to rule by law. One thing, just forgive me. I used to stand up because my bad habits when I teach in the university, instead of sitting down here and then teach to all the respectful audience here. And rule by law, all of you know what it is. But I can say the police force is really very efficient to uphold rule by law, i.e. strict enforcement of the law. And that is really very important. And rule of law, you can see is all the aspect here, I don't want to repeat here. And of course, equality before the law has been proven. Otherwise, the former CE chief executive was not prosecuted yesterday. And most important of all, of course, the judicial independence. But bearing in mind, in the protection of human rights, the police force has a key role to play as well. Organization chart. And you can see that there's a lot of pretty ladies and also handsome gentlemen here. I'm not one of them for reasons I'm not look so handsome. And I have to make some sort of differentiation here. For the training, we have a police college, similar to that of perhaps you can still call it a university or some kinds of tertiary institutes. And the police college is headed by what we call the Assistant Commissioner of Police, and that is responsible for the training here. And then, of course, above him we have the Director of Personnel and Training. But from this chart, I just want to show you some sort of internal oversight built in. And we have the commissioner, deputy commissioners, and one is responsible for the operation, the other one is responsible for the management. And these few guys or ladies, we can just ignore them because they are civilians. And then this part, of course, we can ignore because they are auxiliary police, not the regular police. That is a usual practice, the norm the police force has. And for internal matters, management and then training fall within what we call the Deputy Commissioner of Management. And the operational matters, we have crimes, we have the UB units, and then under the command of what we call the Deputy Commissioners of Operation. So training here, independent from that operation, but how can the trainings provided to our frontline officers or service officers are up to date? And then that is an interesting question. We have what we call the basic trainings, that is the new recruits joining the force as police constables, or the new recruits can join as an inspector, i.e. the officer rank, and we provide some kinds of basic training to them. Perhaps I go to these very important things to you. Nowadays, what we are upholding here is the vision, common purpose, values. Here is our vision. I think we really can achieve that kind of objective. And then one simple question to ask. A lot of police force will say that, hey, our detection rate is really very high, very efficient, and here is the figures. And then the ratio of the police officers to the population is the highest as well. So our police presence is really very good. And all these figures, I must admit that you and I can manipulate. Depends on what you put is the denominator and what you put is the numerator. And a lot of visitors, if you are the first time to come to Hong Kong, one simple question you ask yourself is that, would you feel safe when you walk outside after midnight? If the answer is positive, then achieved. All those figures can be ignored. So don't ask me about the detection rate, conviction rate, prosecution rate, etc. Just ask yourself whether you feel safe when you step outside after midnight. Common purpose, here they are. And then we have a duty. We have that sort of, objective in mind, upholding the rule of law. That is one of our objectives. But perhaps if you read others, common purpose as well, is there any conflict between them? Upholding the rule of law. On the other hand, we have to maintain law and order, prevent and detecting the crime. As what I've just told you, we will, spend some time on the Occupy Central things that, very famous demonstration, peaceful demonstration, and then at the end of it, a lot of people are arrested, and then cannons fires, tear gas fired, and then there's a lot of adverse comment. But no matter what it is, and then you can see the role, the duties performed by the police is not that easy. On one hand, upholding the rule of law, ensure that no innocents would be arrested or prosecuted. But on the other hand, how can we maintain law and order, preventing crimes, detecting crimes? Values, here we are. And then if you ask, how can the police force transform what we have in 1974 and then up until today? And then you can see here is the value we have. When I sit here 2 hours ago, I watch on the floor, there's a wallet. My immediate response is, hey, come on, please pick it up. Don't put it on the floor. Don't cause problems to other people. And then you may ask me why, because I have 29 years in the force. That is the value I have. I have to do something to protect others. It is the born instinct, immediate response to different situations. I cannot change it because I'm really too old. That is my proper answer, perhaps. Responsive to change, you can see why I highlight some of the bullet points in red. Perhaps those important issues you may consider when you share with the people in Hong Kong whether that sort of change in Hong Kong can happen in your own countries or not. Training, what kind of training we have? For the inspector, for the officer's rank, we have that kind of training. And of course, we have to read the laws. And one of the participants has earlier mentioned one thing. Hey, there's a lot of new laws enacted. And then how can those frontline officers adapt to the new laws? Interesting question. But the point, one further award is that, is the law enacted in the most appropriate time? Was there any delay for the law to be effective because of the fast changing environment? Perhaps we can come back later. Here it is, the law, procedures, human resource management, all these sort of things that will be included in the basic training for the police officer. But perhaps go to the first bullet point, as I can tell you one thing. You can see as a leader and inspectors, and then they are required or expected to take command of a situation and judgment to look beyond the office, i.e. if there's some sort of a riot situation, protest, demonstration on the street, gang robbery, burglary, arrived at scene. What should the inspector do? Not easy. That's the reason why when I saw the wallet and then immediate response, and then we have that sort of things that follow. And then sometimes neither of my family, my wife and daughter would understand. Here is for the training of the inspectors, and then for the recruits, i.e. the frontline officers, the constable. The period is a little bit shorter, but the contents similar. Of course, laws will be included. On the other hand, if you ask me, who should pay more, from the organization chart? Is it the commissioner should pay more, or the frontline police officer, the beat officer should be paid more? My answer is the frontline police officer, not the senior officer sitting in the air-conditioned room. Perhaps that is the views after my retirement. The point I want to mention is that when you walk outside with your beat radio, all sort of equipment, you are being targeted. Anything can happen. There's no strict checklist. What should you respond? It really depends on your experience, trainings, and also different knowledge you have. And sometimes it is a life and death situation. Sometimes it's not. But the point is that every situation would be different. And why the police paid a little bit higher than that of other civil servants is how you exercise your discretion to deal with different situations. Perhaps those frontline officers understand the problem they encounter. One problem that they have is that there has been high expectation from the general public. In the old days, hey, just ask the cops, hey, where's the route or the direction to go to this hotel? And then that's all. But now if the response is not prompt enough, clear, direct, complaints will arise. If there's a complaint, and then what will be the consequence? So all these sort of things, training for the frontline officers, the cops, patrolling on the street, and it is really very important. By the way, when they finish these 27 weeks of training in the police college, then they still have to pass the final exam. If they pass exams, and then there will be some sort of ceremony, passing out parade, and what sort of qualification they would have, and then for the inspectors. And then in Hong Kong, we have that interesting stuff, what we call the Hong Kong Qualification Framework, the QF, and there's an independent organization try to certify, some of the qualifications from different fields for the policing matters, and then for the inspector, once they complete that 36 weeks of training in the police college, level 5 qualification will be given. For the frontline police constables, 27 weeks, level 4. And then what's the meaning of level 5? Equivalent to that of a bachelor degree. And therefore, level 4 is an associate degree. So they get the recognition from an independent accreditation organization, i.e. they really have that sort of a quality, and then to do the jobs as required under the law in Hong Kong. That is a speech. Lately, one of my respectful former or retired commissioner, he made the speech in 2001 in Canada. Perhaps we come to some of the interesting issues highlighted by him. Hong Kong people continue to run Hong Kong. That is one of the 4 basic principles enshrined under the basic law of Hong Kong. Second thing is here, my fault. And that is the commissioners continue to run the Hong Kong police force. This is really very important. After the handover in 1997, and then the speech given by Dick Lee is that we, the commissioner, and then continue to run the force, not subject to any political pressure to a certain extent. Problems encountered about 14 or 30 years ago: child drugs abuse, cross-border crime, public order event, public order policing. But at that time, we have a brief discussion on this particular issue. Cyber civil disobedience, the advance of the IT. And then actually this issue was highlighted or addressed some years ago, and then that is in 2000 between Hong Kong and also the Singapore police. We tried to do some things and then foresee what will happen, i.e. if those young guys have some sort of communication through the internet and then do some sort of disorderly conduct against the general public, and then what should be the response? Still, a lot of questions from here. What would be the most appropriate thing we can do? The current Occupy Central event really give us some sort of food of good thought. What should be the immediate response now from the whole government, in particular the law enforcement agency, including the force? Public order policing strategy. And then at that time, Dick Lee has already mentioned, hey, there's really a need to balance the right of those people expressing themselves against the safety and right of the remainder. All the people sitting here, we have different views on a particular issue. There's no absolute right or wrong. I think you do agree. Whether it's right or wrong, I think only the history can prove. But the point is that here is the right situation. How should the police respond? Exercise that sort of balance, how to strike the balance, how to exercise their discretion. That is the key issue. You can see, as I mentioned, there has been rapid expectation or change from the public expectation. And then realizing how the society is changing is not that easy. A lot of people in Hong Kong now are always being challenged. They are not standing with the foot on the ground. They are standing on the air, 離地 in Chinese, in Cantonese. That means that a lot of high-ranking officials, they are sitting in the air-conditioned rooms, didn't notice the actual problems down on the street. They don't notice that there has been a lot of changes outside. If the organization chart I mentioned, those senior officers, if they cannot respond to the changes a little bit too slow, the outcome would be totally different. Here they are. You can see here. Most important thing is here. We treat others as you would like yourself or your own family to be treated. Police officers, they have a lot of power. And that sort of power, we sometimes use a word in Chinese is a 公權, i.e. the public power. That is to say that other people don't have that sort of power. Only those police officers have it. If they abuse that power, the consequence would be really very bad. And then how to ensure you are now exercising your power properly, and then question asked would be really very good is this one. Try to treat other people as what you anticipate if you are being treated by the police officer. Here it is. And then Dick Lee already anticipated that is the most important things to be taken by the frontline police officer. Here he is. From this PowerPoint notes, yes, we have to change. We have to do some things. But that sort of change, am I correct to say that only focus on the hardware? You can buy a lot of high-tech equipment. The point is that how can those people, how they use this sort of IT, advanced IT is the most important things. So you can see at that time the police not just focus on the hardware, but the software as well, the people. We come down a little bit, you can see how the cultural change initiated in the past 20 or 30 years. Here it is. Andy Zhang recently retired, in particular after the Occupy Central event, and then that is what he said. That is the forward in the annual review. Crime rate tumbling, traffic fatalities dropped, complaints against police declined. Technology crime is a major concern. You may immediately ask, because in the past years, how many days? 79 days, and then we have that as Occupy Centrals, and then all the police are fully engaged on that particular operation. So they have no time to take in any new police report. That's the reason why the crime rate would drop. You can have a different analysis on it, but in general, you must admit that the crime situation in the past years dropped. He mentioned about the Occupy Central movement, and still, that is the word given by him. Operationally, the police have been tested to the limit by the unlawful Occupy Central. Really, very important. Unlawful. But what is the meaning, the definition of lawful and lawful? Breach of the law, it means that it must be unlawful. From the rule of law point of view, it may not be. But anyway, from here, you can see the police try to operate independently, not subject to any political pressure, to try to enforce the law, to maintain the law and order in Hong Kong. You can see here, and then there's some support from the community too. Yes. Here it is, our transformation. We try to promote the police force is a caring organization. Caring in terms of external and internal stakeholders. The police force, the senior management, they care about the junior officers. At the same time, they care about the general public as well. Try to meet the expectation, the needs of the general public. And it is proven quite good. At least the police force gets some sort of a reward. Actually, I can bring along this newspaper, you can see it. And then there's been a lot of good or service quality award given by the police force. Service quality wing, what we call it, actually one of the important wing headed by Assistant Commissioner in the organization chart, and that deal with the most important issue, including the cultural change. That cultural change is proven to be quite successful. I.e., how can the police force transform from that very corrupted organization in 1974 and up to date now? So here's another good recognition, that is the recruits after passing out from the police college, they get those good qualification or recognized qualification as degree holders or associate degree holder. Here, I told you before, the force can't just do something to the external stakeholder. Being a caring organization, they must do something to get the support from the junior officer. Otherwise, the whole force cannot work. But how can the senior officers understand, meet the needs of the junior officer? One barrier they have to break it is internal communication. Effective internal communication, either top-down, bottom-up, have to be addressed. How can it be addressed? Not easy. Bearing in mind that the police force before 1997 is a paramilitary police force. Have some sort of military, structured, built in. After 1997, and then we have some sort of changes. Still, the police force is a disciplined organization. Without that sort of discipline, the whole force cannot work. I.e., the senior officers can never ever just accommodate the needs from the lower or junior ranks. Otherwise, the force have limited resources, may not be able to perform efficiently and effectively. Here they are, and then we have some sort of internal communication system built in, and then we get the award as well. Yes. Junior police corps, community engagement. If we can adopt what we call the proactive approach to police, the society, the result would be much better. There's some sort of difference between proactive and reactive. If something happens, you react, of course, eventually you may be able to deal with it. But if you have adopted some proactive measures to deal with some potential problems, outcome would be much, much better. Junior police course, we have it for many years. Last year, we introduced the senior police course. I'm qualified to join. Junior police course, the engagement is that some students, some youth, and then the police officer just try to engage them, to organize some sort of activities, understand them more. Senior police course, those age persons, and then police continue to engage them, get the support from them, and then tell them how to prevent any deception or cheating conducted by those criminals, crime prevention measure. On the other hand, get the support from the young, the youth, and the age. We have some sort of volunteers. They are not paid for those additional works, and try to have some sort of a good relations established between the force and the general public. Of course, we get some sort of good award as well. Personnel training, here we are, and then what is our focus? Of course, and then we have that sort of commitment to the rule of law, the upholding of it as well. Community engagement is really very important. Actually, we have some sort of cultural change in the force. And then in the old days, disciplinary force, paramilitary in natures, and then we try to change our approach to deal with the public. That is not really 100% customer-oriented, but that is service-oriented. The police force coming out from the college, they are supposed to serve the public. They are the public servants. And if that sort of mindset change, of course, we will be supported or appreciated by the general public. You can see the situation. Many of them are young person, students. Why they come up? Actually, those crowds, my daughter was included at the very beginning, and I was really very concerned at that times. So many people come out. A lot of them are young person, students from the university, secondary school. Too many gathered in the heart of Hong Kong. Eventually, the police have to fire 79, tear gas canisters. Are they right? Otherwise, the traffic situation in Central will be seriously affected. If they cannot or fail to contain the problems, what will be the outcome? Bear in mind the history in the mainland, 1989. Would that history repeat again in Hong Kong? All these things come up from the mind of the general public. To make a decision how to respond is not that really easy. You can see, actually, they are not that violent persons. The bad guys, try to damage any properties on the street or government buildings. But I can tell as time goes on, and then some people come up, purposely damage some sort of properties, causing problems, and try to challenge the police. Those people, why they come up, I think it is a political problems, political issues, not suitable to discuss here. But the point is that if you are the police officer, what should we do? They have worked overtime for prolonged period. They haven't met their family member for a period of times, but still they have to stand by in the police station to deal with the urgent situation. The previous two video scripts, captured a year ago. This one just captured 2 days ago. And then actually what I would like to highlight, although it's in Chinese, a good-hearted ladies, in that Occupy Central event, and she tried to provide the food to those protesters without any charges. And she risked to go there every day during that period of times. Why? And she was asked whether she regret or not. Her response is no. She knows that what she is doing is for the future, for the youth in Hong Kong. So different persons have different objectives in their mind. So what is the strategy, the attitudes adopted by the police force in dealing with that public order event? That is their strategies, their approach in dealing with this particular public event. They have to deal with it in accordance with the law of Hong Kong. Law of Hong Kong is what I addressed at the beginning of my presentation. Strict enforcement of the law. Of course, there's a lot of laws, such as the public order ordinance. Those people without or have some kind of public processions meetings, and then there's been objection given by the commissioners that they should not help it, and then they continued and already an offense. Of course, the police has some sort of statutory or legal basis to arrest, to detain those protesters. But those students, those youth come out, try to voice their opinion, express themselves, and then in that situation, the freedom or the right of the expression would be adversely affected if they were to be charged, convicted. In that situation, what should be the approach adopted by the police to deal with that kind of difficult situation? Who is right, who is wrong? Bearing in mind, if the students have a criminal record, what would be their futures? But as I told you before, in the missions, common purpose, values, and then the police have to maintain law and order. And also, under the Police Force Ordinance, Section 10, the duties of police officer, they have to regulate the public meetings and processions and not to have the general public adversely affected. Self-explanatory, a lot of illegal roadblocks affect the traffics. Some other people, they have to go to their office to work. They can't block them, and then late, and then their boss query them. As you can see here, persistent crowd, confrontation, and event. Violent incidents took place at many locations during this particular period of times. There's some sort of expectation from the other side of the general public. Hey, the police has to do something, otherwise their business would be adversely affected. Take for example the minibus drivers. Here is the outcome, and after a period of times, at the end of it, 955 persons arrested. Thereafter, some other people were arrested as well. Here is a conclusion. During the illegal Occupy movement, the police has to deal with unlawful behavior. I highlight here, unlawful. In illegally occupied areas, and at the same time maintain public safety and public orders. The youth, the students gathered in Central's, Mong Kok Causeway Bay, different areas to stage their protests. But there are many other people that they have to work to study at different places. If those people have been affected by the students, then how can the police strike the balance to protect their right? When the police, when they try to do something against those protesters, and then there are some basic rules to comply with, they will try to inform them that, hey, you have to move, you have to leave now. Give them warning, give them time to leave the areas before some kind of a high-handed approach to be adopted by the police. At least, or at last, that event concluded, and then without the involvement of any military force. Whether the police force are doing the job efficiently or they have overdo it, I think we should leave the history to prove it. Different people may have different views. Here you can see, in order to uphold the rule of law, in addition to the police stringent law enforcement action, cooperation from the general public by complying with the law and jointly maintaining social order is also required. So the needs of the majority of the general public, the force cannot overlook. The minority size actually is not minority, depends how you calculate, depends how you play around with those figures. And then, can the police just overlook those expectations from the student, from the youth? Bearing in mind, they're the future of Hong Kong. The world belongs to them, not belong to me, like the old age people, retiring persons are standing here. So if those young persons choose the way they are going to live, should we, those officials, let them do it or have different view on it? We don't know the answer. Perhaps you can read, that is the logical paper again, the conclusion of this particular event. From this event, perhaps we can think about it, whether the force has upheld the rule of law, or the force has just continued to uphold the rule by law, these terms, i.e. strict enforcement of the law only, without some kinds of respect to the human right of the general public. Rule of law here, and this particular event speaks the facts, prove, the mission or the vision, the values, whether it has been accomplished by the force or not. Come back to one interesting question that raised before my presentation. How can the force transform from a corrupt organization in 1974 to a clean, efficient police force nowadays? Just to share with you some experience. In the old days, the salary of the police force is not that very good. Take for example, I myself standing here. A retired police officers, we have the pension, we still have that as a medical benefit, we have education allowance for my children. If those police officers have some sort of a good salary or reasonable salary, reasonable good fringe benefits, would they take the risk to take up those bribes in order to maintain their work for he himself or she herself and their family? Of course, they would try to do their utmost efforts to perform their duties. They would not accept those bribes or corrupt activities. So the payment of the frontline officer, the police force, is really very important. The hardware change, of course, we cannot overlook. Of course, you have that sort of people, you have that sort of good equipment for them as well. So from my point of view, not to mention about the good work done by ICAC, the amnesties given by the then governor, and some sort of internal cultural change has been initiated by the force. And we notice that if corruption, that sort of thing, to continue in the force, it's no good to the organization itself and also to the future of Hong Kong. Interesting is that at that time is before 1997, and you can see from the organization chart, if I think all of you can point out, there's still two aspects working in such ACP and above the level. These two aspects is really very important to the organization as a whole. And then in the old days, we have that sort of European or expatriate officers working in the force. And that really, to a certain extent, that helped to initiate the changes. Of course, the hardware has to be changed. We have that sort of salary increase, but the commitment by the force as a whole, i.e. including senior officers and junior officers, is really very important. It's not that easy, We, the independent, or I mean the individual police force, get a change, but other law enforcement agencies, other government departments maintain that sort of corrupt practice. Can we work? No way. But the commitment by the senior government official outside the force to change that sort of bad habits is really very important. We must appreciate the danger governor, Macros, I think it is. And then that sort of change must go forward. Otherwise, it would be detrimental to the future of Hong Kong. If we all have that sort of things in mind, of course, luckily to a certain extent, and then we have what we call the very successful transformation. But there's still a lot of challenge ahead. And then this, Occupy Central event is one of, to be honest, from the outside and like me, good things, good foot of thought for the senior, government officials to try to think about what should be the correct approach in the futures ahead. Of course, it will also have some sort of a stimulation on the general public. What would be the expectation? But one thing we cannot overlook is that the performance of the force must, to a certain extent, subject to some sort of political pressure. What it means here is up to you to do further research. Perhaps I end my presentation here because I'm still aware of the time. I have 7 more minutes for our discussion, and then questions from the floor are more than welcome.
And I think that summarizes the approach of the police to the people, to treat them with respect and also expect people to treat the police with or the institution with respect. So it's a culture of mutual trust and respect which is developed and which has got established, and the conduct of the police, the way the institution is run and is provided for, also fortifies, reiterates that trust, which is the change that I think most of our colleagues represented here are looking forward to establish or to achieve in their own respective jurisdictions.
Well, friend, you mentioned about 955 arrests plus 48 means 1013 arrests you made. You prosecute only 160. Arrested the persons, what did you do with them? Did you let them free? On what ground? And was there any question of illegal detention? Did you pay some demurrages? Did they claim any compensation for illegal detention? Do you have any provision to that? That's one question. Second is, how do you handle corruption in the police? Very easy to say there is no corruption, but how do you handle corruption? Is there any public oversight mechanism into the police functioning, or it's only the police boss who decides who is corrupt, how to handle? Is there any public oversight mechanism in addressing corruption? Thank you.
How many people, or in terms of percentage, police in Hong Kong, in a year, roughly, are being taken disciplinary or legal action? That is the first. You have presented about the situation in 1970s, when the corruptions were still rampant within the Hong Kong police, and the current situation. Actually, is there any what you said as the hardware changes, regulation or structural organization which happen in Hong Kong? Thank you.
How does the salaries of the police compare with the other sectors of the government?
I take, for example, for the inspector, when they join the police force as probationary inspectors, according to the civil servants, the pay scale, they are the second highest, just down below from the AO, what we call the administrative officer. The AO, as you can see, majority of them is really high flyers, and then they occupy the senior posts in different government departments. The police inspector, the second highest, and then highest than that of the recruiter from the Department of Justice, higher than that of the Government Council. The reason for that, very simple, as I said, and then those police officers, they are paid how to exercise their discretion. It's not easy. There's no book saying that, hey, you must do this, A, B, C, D, E. Different situations require different response. That is one of the reasons. One of the reasons we know that why the police pay a little bit higher. Second question is about the hardware change after 1974. Now, in the old days, I can say this, and this is facts of it. At that time, although I haven't joined the force, I joined the force in 1982. After performing their duties, it's really very common for those officers either go to the mess, go to some other place else, and then gambling is really very common. Drinking, very common. And then we have initiated some sort of changes. Lifelong training, continuous training, sports, volunteer, healthy lifestyle introduced within the force. You go to gambling, you lost money, and then what should be the next thing that they would do? Get the money from those tribe, the bad guys. Of course, those people give you the money, of course, have some sort of expectation. Bribe, corruption, that things that will happen. If those police officers have a healthy lifestyle, of course, the chance, being hooked by those criminals, lesser. I cannot say it will be absolutely clean, but still, that is a change introduced by the force. Some other things include, for the changes, we established what we call as I just mentioned, service quality wing, a special, wing, headed by an assistant commissioner, try to introduce some cultural change within the force with some sort of hardware introduced. Now, take for example the improvement of the police station. In the old days, if some people come into Hong Kong 30 or 40 years ago, when you walk in the police station, the report room is really a nightmare. If you're being detained in the cell, you can never forget it. Bad experience. But nowadays, when you go into the report room, you can see sometimes some aged people sitting there at the back. What are they doing? They are enjoying the air conditioning. That's true. Go to Mong Kok police station. You can see the environment change a lot. They feel very, very comfortable. Of course, some of the hardware changes, the computer system, you cannot overlook it. By the way, I forget to mention one thing. That is really very important. You can see the recently retired commissioner mentioned about, okay, technology crime is really the major problem. IT advancements, no one can ignore it. But the point is that a very, very respectful scientist I have is Stephen Hawking. He said that the future of the world or the end of the world is arising or come out from artificial intelligence. We cannot catch up with those advancements of the IT. One day the human will suffer. Similarly for the police force, the point I want to mention is that we try to anticipate what we should do. In 2001, Dick Lee mentioned about cybercrime. Last year, Andy Zhang mentioned about the technology crime, all this sort of thing. We have a new bureau established to deal with cyber security, technology crime. But are we doing the jobs? Can we take up the challenge? I have some reservation. And then perhaps some of the audience participants sitting here have different views. The humans, we can't really catch up with the fast advancement of the IT. In that situation, what should the police response? What should we do? Not an easy task. Coming back to one thing about those persons detained, in that particular event, as Mr. Lok has mentioned. Now, for the police to stop and question a suspect, as far as he has some sort of a subjective point of view saying that, hey, offense has been committed, then he can stop. Or even that, based on some other orders, requested some people walking on the street to produce a proof of identity without any suspicions required. For the arrest of any suspect, there must be reasonable suspicions that an offense has been committed or will be committed. So you can see, to detain, to deprive some person's liberty, the threshold is not that very high. Reasonable suspicions would suffice. To prosecute a person, the standard is reasonable chances to secure conviction. Of course, we have to consider the public interest. To convict a criminal in the court, the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt. So you can see, at the time that those protesters, the students were arrested, we really have that sort of strong ground. Reasonable suspicion, obvious offense has been committed under different orders, including, of course, summary offense orders or public orders whatsoever you can quote. So arrest them, nothing get wrong. So if those people try to come back and then saying that, hey, this is unlawful arrest, there's a few particular cases. I cannot really, address, every cases. But the point is that for those arrested persons, the grounds of arrest really well established. If acquitted, it is in accordance with the CJS system, i.e. the criminal justice system in Hong Kong. So if they want to seek compensation, they are welcome from different means, civil actions, or under that sort of what we call the criminal justice compensation scheme. Whatsoever means that they want to achieve is not a problem to them. I really don't have that sort of figures. I left the force some years ago, and then perhaps if you want to get the figure, very easy. Go to the Security Bureau, the website, the Security Bureau, and then the police force. As what Mr. has mentioned, we are accountable to the Legislative Council, and then on regular basis we have to go to the Legislative Council to report on different matters. Of course, that included that sort of disciplinary issues. And perhaps my experience, and I just call one case, and then you may understand whether corruption is really very serious in force. A few years ago, a superintendent working in the franchise arrested and convicted. Of course, bribery-related offense, misconduct in public office. The reason why he was arrested and then prosecuted is that, hey, he participated in a dinner. And then in that dinner, he was over, of course, some other people attended dinner, the functions, a meal. And then the person in charge of that restaurant offered some sort of a good discount to him. And as a result, this discount is really related to what we call the licensing issue, because on that day, that superintendent have to consider whether a liquor license has to be granted for that particular restaurant. The case, first trial, convicted, appealed, and then convicted, and then appealed again to call a final appeal, no leave granted, and then the sentence reduced, but the convictions secured. But you ask, from me, that sort of case, perhaps I can say is why he participated in that function. He really don't know. He had no prior knowledge, hey, a very special discount will be given to him in that particular dinner. But according to the law, that is a fact, proven by the prosecution, misconduct in public office. As Mr. Look has mentioned, and then this is a common law offense. Some of the law are really, quite vague. Few of them, as I can mention, neither of the money laundering offense, sections 161 under the crime tolerance, access to computer with dishonest intent. If you ask me, up until now, whether I have committed any offense, I must jaywalking. If I don't jaywalking on the street under 35, 36 degrees and the air pollution, all these sort of things. And then I can highlight one thing is not every law is perfect. The environment, expectation of the public changes. But can the legislatures, legislative council, respond promptly to enact the law? I can tell, never ever. Okay, once the laws, enact, introduce, effective, and then can the law enforcement agents effectively, try to execute those laws? Difficult. A lot of examples, good examples, like the UNATMO, United Nations Anti-Terrorism Measures Ordinance, deal with the terrorist financing, all these sort of things. Because of 9/11 incidents in the year 2000. And then are we dealing with that sort of terrorist financing effectively? I can tell, no, difficult. And then how can those frontline officers have that sort of expertise, knowledge, special knowledge to deal with it? Not easy. Even those legislators, some of them may not know exactly what is the requirement, the statutory requirement. So if you ask, come back to the basic question, the disciplinary, offense committed or any police officer disciplined for the corrupt activities, the figures, I must admit, are really very low. One simple reason, nowadays, the police officer would do some sort of risk assessment. Why do they take that sort of risk to do something? Of course, there's some minorities that still commit that sort of offense.
Since the ICAC was founded in 1974, the Department of Police was probably the first target of ICAC to bring about the reform. My question is, how did the police initially responded to that when the ICAC first started investigation on them? And it has been 40 years since ICAC was founded. So the Hong Kong Police Department, what we see today, probably it's been like that for the last 20 years or 25 years you mentioned. So does that mean that it take about 10-15 years for the police department after the inception of ICAC to come to this stage today? So how long did it take, and what are the major reasons that you would say that cultural shift took place in the police department?
And the Hong Kong Police Force is an independent entity working in the special region here. And how do you collaborate with the police force in the CRP, the People's Republic of China? So when it comes to, especially regarding the border issues and all.
What is the basic education of a police constable when they started there, and what is his salary, and what is his prospect of promotion?
But since the Occupy protests, there has been some animosity by a certain section of the Hong Kong public. And lately, again, I believe the Hong Kong police has created a Facebook page recently, and it's generated a lot of negative feedback as well on the page. In fact, so much negative feedback that we heard the news that the police said it'll prosecute people for making negative feedback on the page. My question is simply, how is the force itself dealing with a youth or a part of society that is viewing it negatively for the first time in, say, decades? And how is the force handling this? So, yeah.
Now, I must declare my interest. I'm trying to, speak, in my current positions as a practicing barrister. And then luckily, and then I have a few cases acting as a fiat counsel and also acting for the defendant as well. And then try to speak what I know. There's no official line and what should be adopted. So it's really personal will. I must declare this first. And then going back to the question. And yes, there's some sort of negative feedback. And then take, for example, you can see, and then from the video, and then a superintendent holding the batons to try to chase the hit one of the protesters. Of course, there's a lot of complaints as well. But to be fair, if you look at the whole incident, not only that particular shot, you are the frontline officer, some other people at your back supporting you, have some sort of operation for prolonged periods, and those protesters are not following your instruction, and they are doing some bad thing, damages, assaulting others, or has that sort of risk to injure others. You are the officers wearing the police uniform. What should you do? So if we just look at one script and then saying that it must be wrong, may not be fair. That thing is really very important. When we try to read from the news whatsoever, try to have overall view what it is. But I would not say that what the police has done is absolutely right. As I said, that perhaps let the history, prove it. So for the youth, the point I mentioned is that we have that sort of community engagement for a long period of times. The junior police course. We try to get into those secondary, even primary schools to encourage them to participate in the activities of the police force, some sort of activities being organized by the police force, so that to let the general public understand the force. What is the problems? What are the good things, bad things? We must have that sort of mutual understanding before the police can get the support from the general public, including the youth. Of course, we will continue. What I know is that the force will continue to try to engage those youths. But it is not easy. Now, to be honest, if I step on those youth, like that of my daughters, what she is thinking, absolutely right. For what reason they have that sort of thinking? Going back to the crux of the problem, that is my personal view as well. Globalization, limited resources, more competitive. You are not competing with those sitting next to you. You are competing with the whole world. How can I survive? With due respect of the limited resources, limited posts, the futures. If we stand on them, they are not wrong. But according to law, they are wrong. So what should the police do? But bearing in mind those police officers, they have their own children as well. So I really cannot answer whether that sort of events really have absolute negative impact. And I cannot answer whether what the police force must be right all the times. Because I cannot control the laptop here. Actually, I can go to the two cases appeared yesterday in Tuen Mun or Kowloon City's court. And then on one occasion, and then the magistrate convict, I think it's 2 young persons. For reasons that there's a lot of mainlanders come to Hong Kong to buy things, shopping in the new territories. And those are two young persons scold at them, pouring water at them against a mother and a young daughter. Of course, the young daughter cried. And then they didn't notice whether they're coming from the mainland. And then those acts really unacceptable. And then the magistrate gives some sort of bad comments on those 2 people. They are convicted. And then on another occasion, for reasons that, and then it is very interesting. It is what we call the assaulting police officer's case, and a lady assault a police officer. Of course, there's a man who is assisting that lady, try to grab her away, from the scene. And for reasons that the sergeants, the police officer, the injured police officer cannot, give some sort of good testimony, good evidence in court. There's some inconsistency in his evidence. As a result, that person is acquitted. But these two cases reflect one thing. We really have, uphold the rule of law. The magistrate, the court, the CJS system, and then based on the evidence, hey, he should be convicted because prosecutor has proved the case beyond a reasonable doubt. On the other hand, hey, that sort of, behavior need to be condemned, need to be convicted, and then the magistrate did it and had some sort of good support from the general public as well. What is the motivation of those two young persons? We cannot comment. But according to the law, both the police, the judiciary, has tried their best to uphold the rule of law. I go back to one question first. Is the police force independent? And from the organization chart, because under the CE, we have what we call the cabinet, which still try to set it is a cabinet. And we have the S4S, Secretary for Security. Secretary for Security, working what we call it the Security Bureau. Under the Security Bureau, we have 8 organizations, law enforcement agencies, including police, custom, immigration, ICAC. And the Secretary for Security only determine the policy issues, and then the commissioner of the police, the head of other law enforcement agency, will deal with the management operational matter. When those policies determined by the Secretary for Security, then take for example the police force have to try to enforce those policies and try their best to do their job within the law, the powers given to them. And the commissioner is one of the principal officials appointed by the PRC, the main names. And very good question raised by the floor before, and hey, who appoint them? Who pay for them? And then that sort of issue arises, and then until that has been clarified, we cannot say whether that organization, that person is independent or not. Now, I would not like to go further. There's a different theory, different argument on this. But the point for the police force is that, as I mentioned in the PowerPoint notes, the commissioner, they have tried to enforce the law, try to exercise those powers conferred under the law, at least rule by law complied. Rule of law, my personal view is that they are changing. They're really changing. What is the rights of the individual, all these sort of things, and there's a lot of different cases. But the problem is how can the force, it's really a big organization, 32,000, whether you want to include the civilians or the auxiliary police. It is I think one of the biggest organizations of the department in Hong Kong. So such big organization, how far it can adapt to the change, in particular the change of legislation, not that easy. So if you ask whether the police force are operating independently or not, you make your own judgment, because the commissioner is not the appointed minister. The commissioner is supposed to be a civil servant. Subject to the civil service rule, they have to retire at the age of 57, all sort of things. But as what those two commissioners mentioned, the commissioner run the force themselves. They would try to exercise their power according to the law of Hong Kong. That's what I can mention. And then the law in Hong Kong, good law must have what we call the common consensus. Common consensus, i.e. the majority of the public must have the support of the majority of public. Draconian law, of course, you know what it is. If there's some sort of political agenda, nobody knows. ICAC, at that time, ICAC established, corruption is quite serious. At that time, I must say that I haven't joined the forces, and I never think of that at that time. So why I joined the police force? At the very beginning, when I graduated from the university studying physics, I should be a scientist, but unfortunately joined the police force. But the image at the old days is not that very good. But after the establishment of the ICAC and the amnesty, what we call an FC is that, hey, the police officer, now the ICC established you have committed that sort of corrupt activities. Either you surrender, volunteer, and then, okay, no action, no criminal, the prosecution would be laid against you. Otherwise, and then you will be prosecuted. Police officer, when they join the force, the salary is higher than that of other government officials. The reason is that the police force is a disciplinary force. And then the salary is higher than that of other disciplinary forces, including ICC, Customs, Immigration, and Fires. And if we raise, the basic or entrance qualification to a degree, there's a lot of other consideration I would not like to spit out here. But the point is that in the old days, the educational qualification is really very low. But nowadays, a lot of university graduates, and then they have or we have to raise the standard. And for the recruits, because we have what we call the DSC, the Diploma of Second Education. In the old days, we have HKCEC, different educational system. But the point is that if they can graduate at least what we call the secondary education, they can join it. But there's some other qualification if they come to Hong Kong from UK or some other institutes, which equivalent to that of a diploma, they can join the force. I can say that that's the reason why we have that sort of QF. That's the reason why for the inspector, when they graduate from the police college, after 36 weeks, they're supposed to have a bachelor degree. But to have a bachelor degree from our old day, at least we must have 3 years of full-time study in the university. But of course, there's some accreditation system adopted to be fair, acceptable by different organizations. But the point is that, very important, hey, educational level raise in our force, in the police force or in different organizations. We always have that sort of things. We recruit them, we check their qualification, but we fail to check their mind. You have a degree doesn't mean that you must be superb. But in general, yes. So I must admit that there's a lot of this argument, from the news in relation to that the Vice Chancellor's appointment in the Hong Kong to the law faculties. So actually, the force has introduced another system to test, their IQ, EQ, all this sort of thing, to ensure that they are not only physically fit to join the force, mentally fit, and then do the job properly, and have that sort of, immediate response to difficult or critical situation like that of the Occupy Central event. Now, in that event, you can see if you have been working at the front line for 7 days without a rest, you can only go back to the station to rest. You can see how much pressure you have. And then when they recruit, those the potential the constable or the inspector, if they don't have that sort of potential, subject to that sort of pressure, and it's not good to the society as a whole. Perhaps that's all of a series and also the requirement, and then from the web page, the police force web page, you can get the details as well. Now, third thing I think is, what is the expectation from the general public first? Would the general public expect that sort of changes? If the general public would not like that sort of change, there will not be any establishment of the ICC, to be fair. Second thing is that you can't just change the organization. The whole government would they committed to get the changes. Then within the organization, bottom, top, and then they have to work together to get a change. It's not easy, painful. Hardware, software introduced. Third thing, the law is there. Corruption, amnesty given, no further corrupt activities, no tolerance. Of course, you speak out, you issue the orders, easy. Whether those orders can be properly executed, not easy, but step by step. Neither of just as I said, in the old days CID, and then after the case, they must go to that ballroom whatsoever. Gambling is very common, 大食會, and then that is have a dinner. after drinking a few glasses of beer, and then all the cards will be placed on the tables. And that sort of gambling activity is the culture in the old days. But nowadays, I seldom see it, at least when I was still invited, because there's a risk involved. Bearing in mind the investigation tactics adopted by the ICAC. Look at the background of ICAC. They are not ordinary law enforcement agency. They came from MI5. Security, one thing. Law enforcement, another thing. So all these sort of things, come together. Luckily, the Hong Kong Police Force has a successful transformation. This I can conclude.
There is a question that he asked regarding collaboration between mainland police.
Now, as I just said, and then actually the police force is one of the government departments. And the point is that neither of the PowerPoint I mentioned, there's a transnational crime whatsoever. And then we really have that sort of, liaison between the police force with different law enforcement agencies is very important, including the law enforcement agencies in the mainland, in other countries as well. So in principle, and then the police force would operate independently, like in principle. But one thing that you have to say is that the commissioner is one of the principal officials in Hong Kong, SAR. And that principal official was appointed by the mainland. Others, I would not like to further elaborate. Whether it is independent or not depends on the definition of independence. Neither of the judge as well, who pay them. But on the other hand, no, they are well secured,